Ladies and gentlemen, in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and indeed across the world, good morning and welcome. The Corporate Governance Committee of the PSOG has been working on the updating of the PSOG Corporate Governance Code for the last 2 years. So we are truly delighted that you have taken the time out of your busy schedules to join us this morning for the launch of the code. You may ask, why is a corporate governance code important? Well, if you have ever taken your hard-earned money and invested in the stock market, or if you are interested in the long-term sustainability of your own business, or indeed, if you are a shareholder who has put capital into a business that you are not running yourself, or if you are management, the recipient of that capital, who has to provide a return to the shareholder, or if you are a director appointed by the shareholders to oversee the management of the company, or even if you have money in a pension fund. If any of these apply to you, you need the assurance that the managers of the business in which your funds are invested are employing practices that foster the long-term success of the business. Even if you are a bank lending money to a business, you want to ensure that that business is around to repay the loan. Unfortunately, over the years, there have been so many huge corporate failures where investors, including small investors, have lost enormous sums of money. So, what could be done to avoid these business collapses? Were there some governance principles, some best practices to guide entities in their quest for long-term sustainability? Different countries faced with the same problems of investors losing their investments agonized over this problem. Jamaica, not one to be left out of major world happenings, had its own financial crisis in the late 1990s, and many entities failed. One of the solutions the world came up with to help mitigate these problems were corporate governance codes. In the UK, you had the Cadbury Code, now the UK Corporate Governance Code. In South Africa, the King Code. Canada has a code. Australia has a code. There are the OECD principles on corporate governance, and many other countries have their own codes. These codes set out practical guidance about strategic leadership and board effectiveness that can help a business to navigate the challenges. Governance is about ensuring that the requisite systems, internal controls, and risk management are in place. It's about looking into the future for the business and setting strategic direction. And even as we speak, good governance would require that businesses and directors get around their boardroom tables and look at what is happening in the world today with Mr. Putin's war and how that will impact their business, and what steps they're going to have to take to deal with the increased gas prices or whatever else may flow. Governance is also about setting the right tone and culture for the organization, and employing the right leadership, all with the aim of helping businesses to achieve long-term sustainability, thereby protecting investors, creditors, employees, and the wider community. The PSOJ, under the leadership of its former CEO, Mrs. Greta Boggs, of blessed memory, determined to put in place a corporate governance code that would articulate minimum standards for businesses in Jamaica. The first PSOJ code was launched in 2009, and we've had various updated codes over the years, including the one we're going to launch today. And on that note, allow me to introduce the 20th president of the PSOJ, a man who actually needs no introduction. A true son of our soil who works tirelessly for the benefit of our nation. A visionary and strategist, Keith Duncan has built one of the leading financial institutions in Jamaica, JMNB, where he serves as the group CEO. Keith's financial expertise has not only benefited the JMNB group, but also Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Keith Duncan.
Good morning. Thank you, Camille. And good morning to everyone. Minister Marsha Smith, if you are online, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us today. Camille Pacey, our esteemed chairperson of the Corporate Governance Committee, who has put so much years of hard work into this effort, along with our founding member of that Corporate Governance Committee, Greta Bogues, who we acknowledge today also. Our Executive Director, Imega Brees-McNabb, hard-working, they're paying the bills, right, Imega? Members of the Corporate Governance Committee, PSOJ members, those in the audience from across Jamaica and the region, welcome all to this conference this morning. And I'm really honored and proud to be here today for the launch of the Corporate Governance Code. This code is a result of the commitment and focus of the PSOJ Corporate Governance Committee, particularly the diligent and hardworking subcommittee that has worked tirelessly for the completion of this product. I also extend heartfelt appreciation to all these individuals and the Corporate Governance Unit at the IDB who provided grant assistance and technical support through this collaborative effort. The entire Jamaica has to be grateful for the immense body of work done over the past 2 decades in developing best-in-class corporate governance standards, which has undoubtedly led to greater transparency and accountability, reduced risk, reduced cost of capital, which provides for greater potential for growth and a more sustainable business environment. Our commitment to the cause has been untiring. Back in 2001, the PSOJ established the Corporate Governance Committee in the wake of the domestic financial crisis in the 1990s and as a result of the various governance concerns that resulted and were evidential. The tremendous fallout in the financial sector begged the question, where were the boards? Where was oversight? This financial fallout in Jamaica, in the financial sector, cost Jamaica significantly. And it can be definitely attributed to significantly to a lack of good governance and oversight. So the role of the committee was to become a primary influencer in the delivery of corporate governance best practices. And the PSOJ introduced Jamaica's first corporate governance code, which was primarily directed at financial institutions. An updated code was launched in 2009 for the JSE publicly listed companies, Jamaica Stock Exchange, publicly listed companies, and in 2016, an additional code was launched which targeted micro, small, and medium enterprises, which we recognize as crucial to drive growth and job creation, and required greater formalization of the entrepreneurial spirit and business practices to provide greater access to finance. However, the committee did not stop there. It embarked on a sustained and continued effort of training competent individuals for directorship. To date, over 1,000 individuals have been trained and are well equipped to serve in public and private boards. This corporate governance code is a practical tool that we launched today. It's more than another wishful thinking, hairy-fairy document. This is a practical tool to assist in strengthening Jamaica's efforts to develop efficient, transparent, and accountable public and private sector bodies. It is in real terms an example of the PSOJ mantra, advocacy to action. This document is actionable. Our sustained efforts for good governance has now been manifested in this code, which is an extremely useful tool which provides the gold standard for good governance, from which entities can extract best practices to build resilience that can stand up in a fast-changing global environment. And Camille just pointed to all the recent developments. We worked through COVID. Now we have the invasion of the Ukraine, and things just keep coming at us. But with good governance practices and the proper oversight, one can really analyze the risk and look at where we need to, where do we take our entities, where do we take our country, where do we take our public sector. All of these areas will result from good governance practices. The Jamaican Code was the first in the Caribbean, and we welcome our Caribbean colleagues joining us online this morning and invite them to use this code to strengthen governance in their own jurisdictions, as we are doing in Jamaica. In recent times, we have seen a number of reports of impropriety in public bodies. So the PSOJ is especially pleased to see the Minister of Finance and Public Service, Dr. Honorable Nigel Clark, after some level of resistance from the House of Parliament, piloting the public bodies management and accountability legislation and regulations through the two houses. He has acknowledged that tackling corruption and malpractice in public bodies is a work in progress. This legislation is a major step in the right direction. In support, the PSOJ Corporate Governance Committee, in partnership with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, through our Directors Corporate Governance Training Program, continues to provide an open database of competent, high-caliber persons of integrity to be able to serve on boards to effect good governance and protect the assets of the people of Jamaica. Both the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have emphasized recently that corruption in both public and private sectors can deter investment and cost, and it actually costs Jamaica over 5% of GDP, or greater than $100 billion per annum. The GOJ on its own cannot effect corruption, as it takes two hands to clap. The narrative is that corruption rests with the GOJ and the public service. We ourselves as private citizens and firms must look into the mirror and look at our own behaviors that undermine systems and processes. From the simple acts that we commit and excuse because of the so-called inefficiencies in the public sector, to the more substantial acts of paying off public officials, very much contributes to the great cost of corruption in Jamaica, which also creates a low trust and a toxic environment. So whatever field we are in, whether in our personal or working lives, it is up to us all, each and every one of us, not to shrug our shoulders at corruption, but to uphold the values of honesty and integrity. Let us be vigilant and determined in fighting the stain on our society, our communities, and our nation. Finally, I must highlight and compel and bound to highlight that this new code was the brainchild of the late Greta Boggs, our friend, mentor, advisor, hard-working Jamaican, patriotic Jamaican, Greta Boggs, past CEO of the PSOJ, who led the Corporate Governance Committee for many years with great distinction, passion, and dedication. Well, we really miss Greta. We miss her really badly. She's a beautiful soul. She was a passionate advocate for this gold standard of corporate governance in Jamaica, and we are indebted to her. We launched this as a part of her inspirational legacy to Jamaica and the wider region. We know she will be very thrilled and very proud to see its completion. So it gives me great pleasure to be here to officially launch Jamaica Corporate Governance Code 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith, for those very insightful remarks, for sharing the history of the code. And yes, this is no longer the PSOJ Corporate Governance Code. This is now the Jamaica Corporate Governance Code. And Keith has encouraged us to be the change we want to see. So that's the challenge for each and every one of us. There are some poll questions that should now be appearing on your screen. Please respond to the poll so we can see what your thoughts are on governance and on the code. And Keith has highlighted for us the actual financial cost of poor governance. So for our financial colleagues out there, you have actual numbers that support the need for this code. At this time, we are so very pleased to welcome the Honorable Marcia Smith, Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. Minister Smith attended the University of the West Indies and the Norman Manley Law School. She was admitted to practice law in 1997. In September 2020, she was elected to represent the constituency of Northeast St. Anne and was that same month appointed Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Also with us this morning is our hardworking PSOJ Executive Director, Mrs. Imega Breeze McNabb. Imega has held this position since January 2021, but in truth, we feel like she has been with us for a lot longer than that. She is known for her extensive experience in building membership organizations through partnership. We are so happy to have these ladies with us this morning. Imega, do you have any questions for the Minister?
Of course, we could not start this morning without giving that opportunity to share some thoughts with us. Good morning, Minister. Lovely having you join us this morning.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be present at today's event.
Wonderful. Minister, do you believe that there's a link between good corporate governance and development?
Yes, there is a definite link between the two things. When we speak of governance, we are speaking of the system by which an entity's leaders and managers, they make decisions, they account, and they steer the direction of the entity. And the way in which we steer our entities will influence how the goals and objectives are set and achieved, how we monitor risk, and how best practices are attained and maintained. The better decisions that leaders make is the sounder the corporate entity's socioeconomic contribution to its owners, its employees, and by extension to the overall community. And a corporate entity does not operate in isolation. First, it is a coming together of capital and human resources in a joint enterprise. And that joint purpose operates within a community. And what your code does is to create a resource standard or a framework for persons to incorporate good governance practices. And if best practices are incorporated into day-to-day planning and management of an entity, it does reduce risk, it lowers the mitigation costs, and it creates greater opportunity for investment and the development of capital and human resources. Therefore, once it is that we have better run entities, we are creating the conditions necessary for favorable development in our country.
Thank you, Minister. So you mentioned the importance of leadership. So I wanted to follow on and ask, please share some of the initiatives that the government of Jamaica, you're consistently implementing or doing on a daily basis so that incorporate the principles of good corporate governance.
All right, governance is important to the government of Jamaica. And as we're going through transformation of the public sector in how we engage with the public and how we deliver services, the maximization of that process will only be present if it is that we have good governance. And one way in which the government is looking at governance is through our public bodies. They are an important subsect of the public sector, and they are integral to the development and implementation of key policy objectives. You would have heard Minister Clark and you have heard your president, Mr. Duncan, mention that the government has passed recently the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Regulations 2021. And the aim of those regulations is to bring greater professionalism to our public boards and to give greater consideration to competence. We have a wealth of human resources within our countries of persons who are able to impart their experience and their integrity, because that is important to our public bodies. And so this regulation does create the framework of the environment in which we can utilize the best of our human capital to run our public bodies. There are approximately 146 public bodies in our country, and I'm happy to hear your president speak about the fact that the government by itself cannot deal with corruption. It requires the stakeholders who also interface with our public bodies and our public officials to also act from a place of good governance in how they access our public resources. So these regulations does reflect the government's intent to ensure that the framework exists for our public bodies to embrace a new culture of governance and accountability.
Thank you, Minister, for sharing with us this morning. And the PSOJ is committed to remaining one of those key stakeholders that will continue to work with the public sector to ensure that we achieve good governance in Jamaica overall. Over to you, Camille.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for that, Minister. And members of the public should know that with the passage of the Public Bodies Nomination and Selection Regulations, we no longer just have to sit and complain about the things that we don't like. Because as the minister said, there are over 146 public bodies, and these public bodies affect our everyday lives. You're talking about water, you're talking about housing, you're talking about garbage collection, you're talking about hospitals. So these new regulations provide that persons who are so qualified or competent, persons who have the skills, persons who are honest and of integrity can apply to the financial secretary to serve on the board of a public body. So this is a call to action for all Jamaicans. It's time for us to participate in the process. Thank you so much, Imega. Thank you so much, Minister. Do we have any questions yet? There's a chat. Have we been putting questions in the chat? Are there any questions? Okay, so we're not seeing any questions in the chat, so we want to know you're all out there. At this point in time, I think we can say we are all agreed that the code is good for business and it's critical for investors. So we've had this code for a while. What were the modifications to the code and why were they necessary? To answer these questions, we have Mrs. Julie Thompson James, one of our foremost corporate attorneys at law, who led the team that produced the 2021 Jamaica Corporate Governance Code. Julie is an attorney at law with an extensive law career, and she's also the founder of Cube Corporate Support Limited. She received her undergraduate degree from Howard University and her graduate degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science. She sits on the board of several companies and is such a valuable member of our PSOJ Corporate Governance Committee. Unfortunately, Julie could not be live with us this morning, but we have done a video and we are going to ask you now to listen as Julie shares with us the changes to the code and why they were deemed necessary.
Thank you, Camille. Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Thompson James. Increasing legislation, emerging local market trends, and international best practices. Three main factors that caused us to have a look at the code. So then let me turn to what are some of the changes now that we made. We didn't see the need to have two separate codes because the philosophy underpins is applicable to all business structures. So we merged the code, and then we created appendices specific to family-owned businesses, MSMEs, nonprofit organizations. And then we introduced new areas into the code. So we changed the philosophy of the code. Previously, the code was company-centric. So all references were made to company, board of directors. We sort of neutralized the code and created a philosophy where it's applicable to all structures, organization, types of business. And then the code principles are now replaced with guiding principles. So we're providing guidance in relation to how you structure your operations. And it's, the philosophy is undergirded by the thought that it's not one size fits all. So governance is not one size fits all. You have to tailor make it, tweak it based on your stage of growth of a company's life and your type of business. We also introduced stakeholder engagement because with the diversity of shareholders that companies on the market now have, you need to engage your stakeholders. They're demanding more, they require more. And so you have to find a way to engage with them. And so we introduced stakeholder engagement. We also introduced subsidiary governance. With the proliferation of group structures, there are a lot of subsidiaries, but there has to be governance not only of the parent, but of the subsidiaries. And so we thought we would include in the code as guidance how you manage governance within a group structure. We introduced the role of the company secretary as a significant item in the code. We found oftentimes the role, although a requirement in the Companies Act, is relegated to routine, mundane record keeping, minuting, but company secretarial work contribution spans beyond that to being a governance advisor. So we have provided in the code a reformulation of the role and the expectation of the role. Previously, you would have seen in the code as well prescriptive names for the types of committees that were recommended that companies' boards constitute to review different matters. So you'd have seen audit committee, probably HR and compensation, probably governance committee. We have eliminated the prescriptive names for board and allowing the companies themselves to so name their committees, but ensuring that the terms of reference for those committees outline specifically what those roles and functions are. And then lastly, we would have updated the code with the passage of all the legislation that we think a company should have regard to, and that's also included in the code. What are the significant modified errors? So of course, with the global pandemic, a risk we never thought we had to face, there have been new and emerging risks facing companies of one kind or the other. Technology is also one. And so we included in the risk management section a beefed up version, guidance in relation to risk management and bringing it home in terms of its importance when running an organization. We certainly looked at code of ethics and code of conduct because we feel that governance is primarily about transparency and compliance. And so we had a look at code of conduct and ethics. We looked at environmental considerations. You know that ESG is now a very big topic, and ESG is now relevant to the sustainability of one's business. And so we have included a focus on the environment in the code. And of course, role of the company secretary does surface again. And what we did, as I mentioned, is that the code too was slanted towards the annual reports, as a requirement of the Jamaica Stock Exchange and what should be included in the annual reports. We have eliminated that because of the philosophy of the code, that it's applicable to all business types. So that in a nutshell is what we have done. We do hope that you will see the benefit in what we've done. This is a standard that many companies will perhaps aspire to. Many companies are already operating at this level. But wherever this code finds you in your stage of growth and in your stage of corporate governance enhancement, we commend it to you. We hope that the companies in Jamaica will continue to grow, make the economy grow, make Jamaica proud, make their stakeholders proud. And so today, we're happy to be launching Jamaica's new corporate governance code. Thank you.
Julie. Thank you for sharing with us the changes that have been made to the code. And as all our listeners would have heard, whatever organization type you have a look at the code because there are guiding principles that can help you as you seek to grow your business. Poll results. Do we have the results of our poll? Let's see what those are. We also want to thank Julie for her leadership of the subcommittee. It was a tremendous amount of work. I am not yet seeing our poll results. Okay. Let me put on my glasses in case I can't see. Yes. Okay. But I think I'm seeing some questions.
A while ago, Camille, and as Julie would have alluded to, this code has been organized for everyone. Every stakeholder can benefit from the principles that are written within this document. So one of the questions that we're seeing here is how will the code be made applicable to the government of Jamaica? I'm not sure if our minister is still online while we try to get the poll answers in. Minister Smith, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
So Minister, I'm not sure if you could just share with us, how do you see this code being applicable to the government of Jamaica?
All right, so the government of Jamaica does have a corporate governance framework for public bodies in Jamaica already. However, governance is an area that you have to be agile and innovative in. And I'm sure that once we take a look at the code and we go through it, if there are any best practices that can be incorporated within our own framework, I'm sure we'll take that into account.
Thank you, Minister. Camille, are you ready with the poll numbers?
Yes, I am, but I'll also comment on what the minister just said, because as she indicated, there's a corporate governance framework for public bodies, which public bodies in Jamaica are obliged to abide by. And so that document and the Jamaica Corporate Governance Code, they would have very similar principles, because the principles of good governance are the same, irrespective of the name of the document in which they are embodied. So definitely, Minister, we are aligned that in fact, in many ways, the government has even been ahead of private sector. So we have our poll now. And the first question, what do you think the introduction of a corporate governance policy will do for organizations in Jamaica? And 98% of persons said allow for greater compliance with legal and regulatory. Ding, ding, that's the right answer. And only 2% of persons said it would be too costly to implement. And on the next one, do you think we should benchmark our local businesses with international corporate governance best practices? And there, 59% of persons said strongly agree. I don't know if anybody can see the others. I can't see, but 59% of persons strongly agree. So the majority of persons agree. Thank you very much for participating in our poll. We now have a panel discussion, and we have an amazing panel of leaders to share with us their perspectives. Joining us on our panel is Mrs. Marlene Street Forrest, the Managing Director of the Jamaica Stock Exchange, guiding the realization of the JSC's vision of facilitating the growth and development of the company and the Jamaican economy. The JSC was rated #1 in the world in both 2015 and 2018. And as Jamaicans, we are so very proud of our exchange. Also joining us is Ms. Marta Viegas. Marta heads the corporate governance practice of IDB, private sector arm of the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. She is responsible to integrate governance within the investment process of IDB to minimize investment risk and to promote impact and development. Welcome, Marta. We're so happy to have you. We also have Ms. Anna Harry. Anna is a seasoned attorney at law and is a member of the Corporate Governance Committee of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica. She also served on the subcommittee responsible for the revision of the 2021 Corporate Governance Code. Anna worked so hard on this code, and we owe her a debt of gratitude. Also joining us for our panel this morning is Mrs. Gail Mcsoloman. Gail is an attorney at law with extensive expertise in the legal field in both the public and private sectors. She is currently the General Counsel and Chief Corporate Secretary for Grace Kennedy Limited. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome all these ladies to our panel this morning, and I want to remind you to put your questions in the chat. So, let us start with Marlene. Thousands of small, medium-sized, and large investors in Jamaica have shown their confidence in Jamaican businesses by investing their hard-earned money in the Jamaica Stock Exchange. The current reality for organizations is demanding change. Marlene, how can good governance help business to stay relevant in the marketplace?
Thank you, Camille. First, let me congratulate the PSOJ on this new code. And just to put it in its context, technological and social developments, employees and stakeholders, and we spoke about the thousands of shareholders that are now a part of the landscape, have certain expectations, and they're changing the way in which organizations look and how organizations feel and how results are to be delivered. They are making demands in respect to what they have invested. There is more demands on organization now, and I'm considering them the ABCDs in respect to demand. There's a demand for organization to be more agile, to allow for business continuity, to look at issues such as cybersecurity, data-driven, to be a data-driven organization, data protection, look closely at ethics and trust, and the whole aspect of social responsibility. So these are the A, B, C, D, and E's. And what organizations will have to do is to ensure that businesses are so run, are so structured in respect to governance that it can achieve all of what we are saying there. Because there is an expectation at the end of the day that these companies must be sustainable, that they must produce results in respect to the investments that have been put into them. And so companies really need to, one, look at their strategies, look at their policies, and understand that these are critical to ensuring the growth and development of their companies, and not only their companies, but overall how it fits into the society. The current reality is that there is a higher demand for inclusion, there's a higher demand for accountability, and it is through the corporate governance framework, through these policies, that the tone is going to be set, and mainly set at the top, through the board of directors, through the employees themselves, and also through other stakeholders. So really, it is important that we cannot not have companies look at corporate governance and define what these are, and to put in place the structures to reduce risk, to address social issues, and again, as I had said before, to set the tone for the organization.
Thank you, Marlene. And following on what you have said there about risk, what do you see as some of the risks for those who choose not to comply with the code? And do you have any evidence to share with us to support your viewpoint?
Yes, there is certainly the risk of failure. The fact is that it is through good governance that you are transparent, that you actually know what is happening in the organization, through the board and the board subcommittees and management. And so it is imperative. The statistics, the world statistics have shown that the companies that have exercised good governance have seen a premium. And because I'm from the stock exchange, I talk about in terms of the return, the price of their shares. That is what you see. And the converse is true, that companies that have decided not to look at this as a very important, critical part of what they do, they suffer because, again, they miss some of the things that should be presented. Issues such as fraud, issues such as interlocking of directorship that may cause some conflict of interest, etc. And so it's impatient of debate that good corporate governance is important to the organization, and the lack thereof is going to compromise the organization. And especially when we are dealing with, we are not a village, we are a part of an international, sector, and within the country, we are part of that. And so the fact is that if you do not have good corporate governance, which many international organizations look at when they are doing business with you, it's really a part of doing business and doing business well. They will fail to have you as part of what they, as part of their team or to do business. So it impacts the organization locally. It goes across borders as well.
And on that note, Marlene, thank you for that. We are going to turn now to Marta. Marta, with globalization driving market unification and fierce competition for investors' capital, how can Jamaica position itself to be a place of choice for investment funds?
Hello, thank you. Thank you for the question, and good morning for you all. First of all, I would like to begin congratulating the PSOJ and Jamaica on the launching of the new Corporate Governance Code. We supported that initiative with much enthusiasm. And to answer your question, I would like to take a step back and of course highlight the unprecedented challenges, the damage, and the uncertainty that we have all seen on a global scale over the last 2 years. There's a personal loss, there's devastation on top of the economic damage, and emerging markets, of course, have been hit hard with large capital outflows, increased borrowing, depreciated currencies, slow growth, and all that hindered the ability to bounce back. And that in several regions. So on your question, what can Jamaica do to position itself to attract foreign direct investment? And what are other emerging economies doing to become more adaptable, resilient, to recover, and to attract? So I would like to mention two very important factors. The first one, we see a lot of opportunity in sustainable development. We see potential in sectors with the need to adapt for climate change, sectors most likely to attract institutional investors looking for ESG investment opportunities. And as a development bank, our role is to mobilize the global ESG money out there and to direct it to the region. And the global dedicated impact investment market is today estimated to be roughly $715 billion. And we have to attract this to the region. So the first answer is therefore investing in sustainable development. And the second is specifically focused in corporate governance, making corporate governance key in the recovery process. And as my colleagues spoke, so well before me, and this is Camille spoke, and Keith, and it was spoken so well before me. Governance is essential to generate trust with investors and with creditors. It improves decision-making effectiveness. It's about organizational resilience and performance. And the point that I want to make it very clearly, it's deeply connected with sustainable development because it helps the effective allocation of corporate resources. It improves engagement with stakeholders and mainly the alignment between purpose, strategy, and corporate operations. So I think if, to answer your question, what can Jamaica do to attract, to position itself in this new world organization, in the globalized competition for these resources, is sustainability and corporate governance to attract, to promote trust and attract the investment in the region.
Martha, thank you for that. That was excellent guidance. So can you share with us what you're seeing internationally in relation to corporate governance codes?
Yeah, I would say that the very concept of governance has evolved significantly over the last years. Governance until recently was mostly focused on the company, the optimization of the benefits to the company and its shareholders, and the well-being of society, the environment, and the stakeholders was not mainstream an issue of corporate governance. Private companies would mostly see this as a public sector obligation. But now the role that the companies play in society, in our daily lives, have become much more a part of corporate governance. And of course, this change is a reflection of the social out, the ethical standards that we want to see the companies follow, coupled with the recognition that the public sector cannot do this alone. So the companies, they need to deliver a purpose because it's aligned with the well-being of society, and the companies need to operate in a way that is ethical. And corporate governance today, it's about that. It necessarily encompasses a purpose, values, stakeholder engagement, a strategy that encompasses, how are you going to do with governance? So governance is about leadership, ethical leadership, and it creates all the systems that interact internally and externally on how the company operates. And this is why I am very enthusiastic about the PSOJ Corporate Governance Code, because it's very aligned with this international view. It's a very modern code because it offers a reference, a framework to facilitate the control, the direction of companies, to mitigate the risks, and to protect the companies from the risk of corruption, and optimize the resource management, and increases investor confidence to help companies to grow sustainably. And we, of course, hope that the updated version of the code facilitates.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Martha.
Of these practices.
Yes, that was excellent guidance, and I hope all our participants are paying attention. As we say in Jamaica, let those who have ears, let them hear. So, Ada, you were part of the team that produced the code. Did you all just sit in a back room here at the PSOJ and decide that these were the governance principles and best practices that we should adopt in Jamaica? Tell us, how did you all do it?
Well, the current version of the code which we're launching today was preceded by versions published in 2006, 2009, and 2016, which had been targeted at publicly listed companies. And in 2016, another version was also launched aimed at MSMEs. However, in light of developments in the local legislative landscape and growth in entrepreneurship locally, developments in relation to the concepts of stakeholder capitalism and deeper focus on environmental, social, and governance concerns globally, the Corporate Governance Committee felt it was a good time to review the 2016 codes to bring them current with international best practice. And so our beloved Rita, to whom the PSOG and specifically the Corporate Governance Committee owes a debt of gratitude, started the process by convening a subcommittee chaired by Julie Thompson James. That subcommittee consisted of current and prospective members of the local legal fraternity, as well as representatives of the Jamaica MSME Alliance, the Financial Services Commission, the Jamaica Stock Exchange, academia, and international tax and advisory services experts such as KPMG and PwC. And the members of the wider Corporate Governance Committee also offered their input. In creating the code, we conducted extensive research. This was a 2-year process of research and collaboration. We reviewed the corporate governance codes out of the UK, South Africa. We reviewed the ICG and global principles from 2017, OECD governance principles, which were updated in 2015. We reviewed Australia's corporate governance principles and recommendations, as well as local legislation, which had been amended or promulgated since our last set of codes in 2016. And then having done that, and in addition to the stakeholder input from the committee and the subcommittee, there was also consultation with the Chartered Governance Institute through its Jamaica branch, the Corporate Governance Unit at IDB Invest, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Jamaica, and the subcommittee also received invaluable input from Mrs. Suzanne Golson of the Faculty of Law at UWI, the University of the West Indies, and the Honorable Mr. Douglas Orain, both of whom are experts in their respective areas of engagement. And so this code is an amalgamation of the 2016 codes, which has been updated to reflect more current governance standards and practices, as informed by the collaborative input of a wide range of stakeholders and experts, both locally and internationally. Thanks for the question, Camille.
Anna, participants, give the subcommittee a clap. That was a whole lot of work that they did, and we really owe them a debt of gratitude. And so we have Grace Kennedy in the house. Now, is there anybody who doesn't know the name, the brand, Grace Kennedy? Grace Kennedy is a homegrown family business which has, over the last 100 years, yes, they are 100 years old, grown into an international conglomerate. Gail, we are so delighted to have you with us. What role has governance played in the success and longevity of Grace?
Thanks for having me, Camille. It's really my pleasure. And I have to say a special good morning to Minister Smith. We actually went to school together, so I'm so happy to see her in this forum. And I know of her commitment to good governance, so I know she will support this initiative to its fullest. And the PSOJ team, and of course, my fellow panelists, good morning, and the participants. We have 82 persons online, so that's fantastic. Grace Kennedy, yes, we turned 100 on February 14th, and we are very proud of that and in celebration mode. And absolutely, Camille, good governance has been in our DNA from the very beginning, and it has contributed to our longevity. President Keith Duncan spoke about good governance contributing to resilience, and that is absolutely true. And our founding fathers back in 1922, when, if you've heard my group CEO, Don Webby, speak on the issue recently, he talks about the fact that we still have our balance sheet from the first year in business. And it shows that we started with a dray and a mule. And in that first year, we had 15,000 pounds of revenue and a whopping 800 pounds in profit. Now we have 800 million US dollars in revenue, and we're operating in over 50 countries across the world. So yes, good governance is a part of our DNA, and it has certainly contributed to our success and our longevity. And what I really love about this code and the initiative that we have taken, led by the PSOJ and across Jamaica's leadership, is that we recognize that the world is borderless. And so we have to operate at international standards if we expect to continue to grow and develop. And so the great thing about this code is that, as Julie indicated and Anna spoke to it as well, is that it meets you where you are. So I think so many people are intimidated by the concept of corporate governance because they think it means that you have to have a fully robust enterprise risk management framework, and you have to do annual board evaluations, and you have to have an internal audit department, and you have to do all these things that seem insurmountable and quite frankly costly and overwhelming. But the truth is that you need to start where you are. And good governance is in bite-sized pieces. It's about what's in your DNA and what's in your culture. And so in Grace Kennedy's culture, and I mentioned our founding fathers, Louis Fred Kennedy, John Grace, James Mcsoloman Sr., they were about doing the right thing. So honesty, integrity, and trust, and our purpose and our ethos is we care. And that has maintained. We've been dynamic and we've changed, but those things have stayed with us. So we care about our products, we care about our employees, we care about the communities we operate in, which, Martha, includes our impact on the environment. We have always cared about those things, and we continue to evolve and improve. And I think that is what has contributed to our success. And Marlene spoke to it. She presides over the most successful stock exchange in the world. And the truth is that we all know the studies that stakeholders, and this is increasing daily as our stakeholders become more demanding, our consumers, they care about your purpose and what you do. They care about governance. They will pay more for a product or a service because the company is well governed and transparent. And they'll pay more for stock in a company. So good governance, actually, I know some people, people hear about corporate governance and their eyes roll into their back of their head, and it's just this airy-fairy thing. But it flows to the bottom line. It does. It speaks to your longevity and profitability. So that was a very elaborate way, Camille, I think, of answering the question, which is, yes, has good governance principles and our commitment to it contributed to Grace Kennedy's success and longevity.
Brilliantly answered, Gail. Thank you so much for that. And Grace Kennedy is such a testament to governance. And if you check the governance awards that we have in Jamaica, you will always see their name. So, Almega, are there any questions that our participants have?
Yes, Camille. I'm seeing at least 2 questions here in the chat. And the first one I want to pose to Martha. Could you please elaborate on the link between corporate governance and environmental, social, and governance principles?
Of course, they're deeply linked. I think the governance, the G of the ESG has a lot to do with the how. Governance is first, it's about leadership. It's about how we create that company and how we manage that company, and what systems do we put in that company for decision making and oversight and transparency and in relationships and engagement with stakeholders. So that is about governance, systems and processes to facilitate the accomplishment of objectives and purposes, and the very design of the purpose and the objectives. And the aspects of environment and social are the impacts of the company's operations in where we live. So it's deeply connected. I would say it's ENS is the what, and governance is the how. Is the how you do it well. So it's how I perceive the ES and the G acronym.
Thank you, Martha. The governance is how we do it well. And Marlene, I know this question isn't in the chat, but I do know that the stock exchange is looking at ESG overall. Would you like to share some of that with us?
Yes, it is important, we feel, that while we speak to governance, we look at the role of the company in a complete way, looking at the environment and looking at how the social aspect impact on governance and governance impact on them. So as Marta says, the G is the G in ESG, and we feel that is the corporate governance is almost a subset now of ESG. So we have to now look at the impact we have seen with the pandemic. We have to look at the impact of the E, the impact of the S in the social, and how the responsibilities of the companies in relation to these two. Just recently at a forum that a world forum, it was said that the stock exchange, because the listed companies are a group of companies that has more impact, could have more impact on the E and could have more impact on the S. That stock exchanges worldwide should now contemplate how they encourage Earth is encouragement of companies to look at the environment and to look at the social aspect. So obviously, the stock exchange will be putting as part of its requirements for companies to at least in the first instance speak to how they operate within the sphere of environment, and also what sort of social activities. And when we say social, it encompasses the entire communities, etc., and how they treat with that in terms of the entire management and structure of the organization.
Thank you very much, Marlene. And Camille, I know our members and the broader Jamaica will be hearing more from us as the E, the S, and the G. All right, so I think we have one question to Gail. How would you guide and advise family businesses to incorporate good corporate governance principles?
That's actually a great question. And it speaks to what I said earlier about sort of how much I appreciate this code being very practical, and the recommendations can be implemented wherever you are in the process. And so for family businesses, the principles really remain the same, that you need to ensure that you have the right people in the right places throughout the organization, at the board level, at management, and right throughout. You need to ensure that you're merit-based. You need to ensure that you hold people accountable. May or may not be harder in a family business, but once you have transparent and robust systems in place to hold people accountable, and you have a level playing field, you ensure that you engage in adequate training for your team members. You ensure that you are applying the best principles when it comes to accounting, reinvestment, audit, risk management, forecasting, budgeting. I mean, you just essentially you apply the same principles at the family business level or a smaller company level that you would to a multinational, which is that you ensure that you establish certain principles for yourself, you track them, what gets measured gets done, and you adhere to whatever commitments you have made, and you operate on the principle of transparency and accountability and integrity. But I think the important thing is to not bite off more than you can chew. Naturally, you have to be aspirational. So you always want to be striving to improve. But you look at where you are, you assess the gaps, and you have a timeline and a framework to establish where you want to get to, and you break that down into bite-sized pieces. You assign particular roles and responsibilities to particular individuals in the organization, and you implement bit by bit and track your progress.
Thank you, Gail. Fantastic. So this code is for everyone. So I know we want to wrap up now, and the only question left to be answered is, how do I get access to this code? So it's not the best kept secret in Jamaica, but we're all using it in our lives as individuals, companies, just public sector, private sector. So we have the code. It will be going up on our website today, www.psoj.org, and you can download. We will also be direct mailing it to our members. Call us at the PSOJ. We can also send it to you directly. We're available, and we're gonna make this code a Jamaican code, as it is called, right, Camille? It is for Jamaica. It's not for the PSOJ and the 80 people on this call. It is for everyone, and we will be sharing those principles wide and far.
Thank you, Imega, and thank you to our panelists. That was so instructive. So first we had the G, now we have E and the S come join the G. But we have given you guidelines, and this is the code, and it is for everybody, as Imega says. Our 2021 Jamaica Corporate Governance Code has been officially launched. We want to thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us this morning. We want to thank our President, Keith, Mr. Keith Duncan, Minister Marsha Smith, Mrs. Julie Thompson-James, Ms. Anna Harry, Mrs. Marlene Street Forrest, and the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Marlene is a member of our Corporate Governance Committee here at the PSOJ. So is Julie, so is Anna. We want to thank IDB Invest. Without your support, I don't know if we would have been able to do the job that's been done. Marta Villegas, thank you for being with us this morning. We want to thank Gail Mcsoloman of Grace Kennedy. Gail is a member of the PSOJ Corporate Governance Committee as well. And of course, Imega Breeze McNabb, who has so brilliantly shared and managed the chat this morning. And the team at the PSOJ. I won't call any names, but they have done so much work, and I still want to call Amashika. I'm not calling any names. Thank you, PSOJ team members, for all you've done. And as our CEO says, go to the PSOJ website and see the code. We are going to have follow-up sessions where we can go into more details, where we can answer more of your questions, and where we can talk a little bit more about the E and the S. So thank you for joining us this morning. Remember that governance is not an event, it is a journey. It was my pleasure to be your moderator today, and I look forward to seeing you all on this journey.